Hello everybody and welcome to this class on the Mencius. During our class on Confucius and the Analect, we could read that Confucius didn't write any book, but was much more interested in transmitting the five classics, the wisdom of the ancient. Confucius had a great admiration for the Zhou culture and wanted to transmit it. So if Confucius didn't write any book, his sayings were recorded by his disciple and put together in the Analect. And in the Analect 1613, we have a situation where Confucius is talking with his own son, and he is asking his own son, Boyu, to read the book of poetry. Because according to Confucius, when we read the book of poetry, we get a lot of tools to interpret our emotions and to channel them. It's a way to build up our personality. It's a way to learn to speak in public and to speak about ourselves. After the death of Confucius, his son, Boyu, transmitted the Confucian heritage to Zisi, his own son. And Zisi was a teacher of Mencius. So in fact, Mencius was never into contact with Confucius, but 2 or 3 generations later could learn from Confucius through the Analect and the 5 classics. So Confucius wanted to transmit the 5 or 6 classics and the Zhou heritage to his son Boyu. Boyu transmitted the same heritage to Zisi, his own son, and Mencius received the Confucian message and tried to develop and deepen him. Mencius is in dialogue with different schools, Moism, Taoism, and Chunzi. So he is going to give more structure, more systematicity to the Confucian message. But if you think about this mission, about this process, well, Mencius was very focused on transmitting the Confucian doctrine. And he would acknowledge that without being a disciple of Confucius himself, I mean, there is a challenge here because he was not into contact with Confucius, but still he wants to transmit Confucianism. And the last sentence of the Mencius, 7b34, is complaining about who is going to transmit this philosophy. And here there is a challenge because if you were not in contact with Confucius, you can only learn Confucianism through books. And as you know, in the Analect, we have different way to speak about the 5 classics. So the 5 classics as an object of conversation between friends, or as an object of study, or anyway. Mencius needs to find a way to reach out Confucius through his books. And he will set up 2 criteria, 2 methods, 2 ways to be into contact with Confucius. The first one is going to try to go back to the intention of Confucius. When Confucius says something, what was his intention? And then the second criteria is going to try to be as much as possible familiar with the context of the Analect. So the first criteria, to go back to the intention. Well, Mencius is here using an image, like when you want to go, when you have a river who goes to the sea, and if you try to go back to the origin of the river, to the source, well, that's an image of trying to go back to the intention of Confucius in the Analect. So this is for him the way we should read ancient text. And the second criteria, it's about trying to know their word. If you remember, at the beginning of the Analect, we have this sentence, is it not a joy to speak with friends from afar? And there is all this theme of friendship among scholars in the Analect. Mencius is receiving that, and for him, when we try to learn or to study something, we become familiar with other scholars. And then, on this process, we also become friends with people who wrote the book. We become friends with scholars, with sages from the antiquity, repeating their poem and reading their book. And we are through this process, we adjust ourselves to them. We try to communicate with them. And this is exactly what Mencius did with Confucius. He read the Analect and tried to come into communication with Confucius. Thank you for watching, and I wish you a good week of learning.